Rome did not always win with numbers. Sometimes it won with ghosts, when the legions broke, when fresh recruits ran, when enemies believed Rome was finally weak. A quiet order was sent across the empire, not to young men, not to eager volunteers, but to warriors who had already survived hell. Men who had retired, men who had buried their swords, men who believed their wars were over. Rome called them back. They were known as the Evocati, the empire's deadliest hidden army, and Rome's most dangerous secret. The Evocati were not ordinary soldiers. They were veterans, hand-picked from Rome's most brutal wars, men who had already completed their service, men legally free to walk away from battle forever. But Rome knew something terrifyingly simple. A veteran who chooses to return is more lethal than a recruit who is forced to fight. Evocati were recalled personally by generals and emperors. They were promised land, wealth, and honor. But more than that, they were trusted. They did not stand in the front ranks for glory. They stood where battles were about to collapse, and when they arrived, the tide changed. Evocati had seen too much to be afraid. They had survived ambushes in dark forests. They had stood against barbarian charges. They watched friends bleed out in the mud. Fear no longer ruled them. Unlike regular legionaries, Evocati received higher pay, better equipment, preferential treatment, exemption from hard labor, but make no mistake, they earned every privilege in blood. They fought not because they had to, but because Rome needed them. Julius Caesar understood power. During his civil wars, when Rome turned against itself, Caesar didn't rely only on loyalty. He relied on experience. His Evocati were veterans of Gaul, men hardened by years of endless warfare. At Pharsalus, when Caesar faced Pompey's larger army, it was the Evocati who reinforced weak points. It was the Evocati who held the line when defeat seemed certain. Caesar trusted them so deeply that he placed them where failure was not an option. They were not just soldiers. They were insurance against collapse. The Evocati terrified Rome's enemies. Why? Because enemies knew what they represented. When fresh legions appeared, it meant Rome was confident. But when Evocati appeared, it meant Rome was desperate. And Rome only grew desperate when it was ready to annihilate everything in its path. Veterans moved differently. They spoke less. They wasted no energy. Enemies saw their scarred faces, calm eyes, and understood one brutal truth. These men had survived worse than this. Rome rarely advertised the Evocati. Why reveal your last weapon? They were deployed quietly, often at night, often at critical moments. They reinforced broken lines. They reinforced, led counterattacks, stabilized chaos. While young soldiers chased honor, the Evocati chased victory. They were not legends sung in taverns. They were solutions whispered in war councils. As Rome expanded, its enemies grew smarter. Wars became longer, battles more complex. Rome needed soldiers who could adapt instantly. The Evocati filled that role. They trained new recruits. They advised commanders. They fought like men who already knew death and were unimpressed by it. Without them, many Roman victories would have turned into catastrophic defeats. But there was a cost. Evocati were men who had already paid their dues. Returning meant risking everything they had earned. Many never made it home again. Some died defending an empire that would barely remember their names. Rome rewarded them with land and wealth, but history rewarded them with silence. Empires are not saved by fresh blood alone. They are saved by memory, by experience, by men who have already stared into the abyss and returned. The Evocati were Rome's final defense, its hidden blade. Its deadliest secret. When Rome stood on the edge of collapse, it did not scream for help. It whispered to its veterans, and the ghosts answered.